A2 Nemesis is a seemingly simple air fighter card with one generic, one fuel and one equipment resource cost, meaning that if you supplement all the costs it will at best cost 5 resources. It has 1 turn preparation time, which is pretty standard for units of this cost type, and it has 19 health and damage values. Just 2 abilities. One is anti-ground, which means it can block army and soldier forces. And the second one is that it takes no damage from soldier or army forces without anti-air. If you take a closer look at this card, we notice some interesting things. It has a very interesting 90 damage and 90 health value. Combine this with its quality of anti-ground, meaning it can block land forces, and the ability to not take any damage when it's blocking soldiers or army forces without anti-air mechanic, you will notice some rather interesting aspects to this card. If we take a look at some of the land forces, or actually all forces with anti-air, we will notice an interesting thing here. All the non-rank 4 cards have no higher than 80 damage, in case of Scorpion here, which is the highest damage dealing anti-air force outside the rank 4s, meaning that the Nemesis with 90 health, even though it takes damage from anti-air units, will be able to easily survive that encounter. The only unit that is able to destroy Nemesis in such trait is the Apex 55 mech, which has whooping 240 damage. This means that the land units that have high damage, such as the fabled T99 Lion heavy tank with its 120 damage, would be unable to damage the Nemesis at all. Additionally, all the heavier units with Blitz mechanics, like this Goliath, would also be unable to destroy it in battle. To my current understanding of the game mechanics, the ability of A2 Nemesis to not take any damage from soldier or army forces does function a bit like evasion does when it comes to Blitz mechanics. Blitz is a mechanic that essentially does the excess damage that goes over blocker's health to the original target. So we use the earlier mentioned Goliath as an example. You can see it has 210 damage. So if I would block this with A2 Nemesis, A2 Nemesis would survive and not die. However, it was only reduce this damage value by 90, which is the base health value of the A2, dropping it to 120 damage, and still damage the original target, be it territory or a building. Just think it like it's slowing down the Goliath instead of actually stopping him. Of course, this is something that might change in future, or I might get some new knowledge about it. If I do, I will add a comment about it on the comment section. One massive upside for the A2 Nemesis is that if you look at this resource cost, it doesn't have a power value. This is important because there is a VMT called EMP Discharge, which destroys all air units that have a power cost. Generally, most helicopters and the prototype cars, like 101X prototype, use power, as well as most notably Wingman and the drone flyer units. This means EM pools can take out those units quite easily, but it's unable to touch the A2 Nemesis. Let's take a look at the air units next. There are currently only 6 air units with 90 or more attack, one of them, of course, being the A2 Nemesis itself. Then there's the Air Strike Fighter and the Gemini GX with 100. The rest of these air units that have more than 90 damage are bomber units, and bomber units have a mechanic that says they can block and can only damage buildings, territories and leaders, meaning these cards are unable to damage the A2 Nemesis. This translates to a simple truth that if you fireforge this A2 Nemesis, It will have 100 health and as such is unkillable in exchange by air forces unless it faces a Gemini as when it comes to raw damage. This is not true, however, if you consider card abilities. Let's say the RR5 Pulse has an EMP mechanic which says that if an air force blocks this, eliminate it, meaning it should A2 Nemesis block this card, while it would destroy the RR5 Pulse, it would also get eliminated. Additionally, if we go back to land units, should you also block one of the cards with the Deadman mechanic, Deadman being a mechanic that eliminates a unit, that eliminates the card in question, the Nemesis would also be eliminated, like with the EMP balls. As for cards that go well with the A2 Nemesis, there are of course the carriers, like the Avon Poseidon carrier, specifically, which lets you find fighter forces in your arsenal. So using this card you could easily get three free versions of the A2 Nemesis from your deck, should you want to run that combination. The other carrier, the A4 Revenge of the carrier, is also able to do the same, but its limitations are less strict, since you can take any air unit with it, so you might want to save it for something bigger. As for weathers, Cloud Cover is a good pick for Nemesis, and Cloud Cover boosts all their unit health by 20, and it also causes the enemy legions to lose anti-air. While Nemesis is not going to die from those blocks, since anti-air only eliminates bombers automatically, they can still prevent it from doing damage, so you might want to use Cloud Cover to prevent that. It's also possible to remove stealth effect with weathers, but since this requires you to combine it with something else, just as the +2 card, I will not cover that. Instead, let's take a look at the buildings. There are currently 2 buildings with Seek ability, and Seek is the ability that removes enemy stealth. With one of these cards, namely Advanced Detection Facility and the Amplified Uplink Facility on the field, your A2 Nemesis is able to also block stealth land units and stealth air forces, vastly expanding its ability to act as a defender. So do remember that these buildings need to be defended. However, should you have multiple copies of the A2 on the field, you are most likely able to protect them anyways, outside of course Navy forces, which also can attack buildings. Speaking of buildings, when it comes to air forces, there is a card called Chaka Air Base, which allows you to find a specific air force in your arsenal and show it and put it in your legion. So if you have a Jackal airbase on your field and you can protect it for the duration of Jet's ability, which in combination with preparation time takes 3 turns, you can play 3 A2 Nemesis from your deck, although it will still have its preparation time, so it will come to play face down, combining the total time you get one ready in the field to 4 turns. As for the weaknesses of the A2 Nemesis, the most notable one is that this card has 90 damage. This means that all the control effect cards such as Brainwash, Targeted Sabotage, Destructive Hijacking and so on are able to take control of this card or eliminate it outright. You should specifically be worried, instead of the usual suspects of Brainwash and so on, about an inter card called Destructive Hijacking. While being rather expensive counter to A2 Nemesis, this one not only eliminates the card but also deals its attack value as a damage to your territory. So if you are playing a lot of Nemesis on the field and you are running low on territory health, you might be on alert for Destructive Hijacking or even use it against your opponents should they use Nemesis, since 90 damage is plus elimination of a unit is a rather powerful combination. As for counters to A2 Nemesis, of course the earlier mentioned Control Mechanic and Destructive Hijacking work well. You can also, if you just want to bypass one Nemesis, just use Equipment Recall to temporarily flip it face down, meaning you can just attack through it, though it only lasts 1 turn, so it's not that effective measure. If you want to find a real hard counter for Nemesis, however, you should take a look at buildings. Besides land and sea forces, there are also buildings with some anti-air mechanics, namely the Laser Defense Station, which has 120 damage, as well as the Surface to Air Missile Sign, which has 160 damage. So both of these cards would be able to block and eliminate the A2 Nemesis, as they also have the entire mechanic which allows them to do so despite being buildings. They are also unaffected by air force damage, so they are hard counter in the literal sense of the word. And since builders don't heal, unlike forces, that's a huge benefit for them. You can also, of course, use weather cards to prevent Nemesis from attacking and defending, just as Violence Tornado. It also forces you and your opponent to discard 3 cards besides preventing air forces from attacking or blocking, so it's mostly used for mill decks. Additionally, Blinding Sandstorm card prevents air forces from attacking and blocking, and that's a really good card as a counter for Nemesis. Of course, if you just want to stall, you can just use Freezing Rainstorm on the Lasting Blizzard cards, which completely prevent all forces from attacking. And if you combine with them with a certain rather niche card, that can be powerful if you go for that type of tactics. I used the word niche, though I think this card is seriously gonna be a mainstay on most of the decks. Push 2 also allows you to use those cards that prevent force types from attacking and blocking, and still use those force types yourself on your turn, at the cost of 1 more on 1 equipment. It's generally extremely good card in most situations. To sum this all up, A2 Nemesis is a fairly affordable, versatile anti-air and anti-ground blocking unit that especially excels at blocking ground forces. It doesn't have that many counters outside the rank 4 Apex, as it's immune to ground force damage, and even anti-air forces in this game do not have enough punch to take it out. It's however heavily countered by buildings, as well as any form of mind control, as well as mechanics that destroy a unit outside pick-off mechanics, since there are currently no pick-off mechanic that targets air units in set 1. Now, should you fire force this card or not? And the answer for this is sounding yes. When you think about if a card should be fire forged or not, you have to think what type of cards it faces. And the cards this one will be facing are probably the AX Strike Fighter and itself A2 Nemesis, since it's automatically more or less can counter the weaker forces. This means since both of them have 90 damage, if you fire force this and get the extra 10 health, you will be having 100 health, and now I just added 2 more forces to the list that this card is able to entirely block. A2 Nemesis is an extremely good card, especially if you just want to have 1 air unit type in your deck just for additional defense for land and air forces, while you go for something else, let's say Star Tactics or Navy forces. I highly recommend it on most decks if you need some versatile defense abilities.